Hello and welcome to Under the Umbrella. I'm WDTN Plus meteorologist Melissa Barrington, and on the show we like to highlight various types of different topics, all related to weather. And today we are going to be talking to Julie Dian-Reed, who is a hydrologist with the National Weather Service in Wilmington, Ohio. Hello, Julie, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So let's start with something really simple. First off, what is a hydrologist and what's the difference between a hydrologist and a meteorologist?
Excellent question. So my primary background is in meteorology, but the difference between a meteorologist and a hydrologist, think about meteorology is the study of the atmosphere. So everything above the ground, right? Where the clouds will be, where rainfall will form, how much rain will fall, snow, that sort of thing. Hydrology, that's the science of the study of what happens on the ground. Essentially, how does water flow over an urban area? How does it flow into creeks and streams? How are you concerned about low water levels in terms of drought? Are you concerned about high water levels in terms of flooding? So that is the science and the study of how water behaves on the ground and even below the ground.
So someone could easily switch over then from being a meteorologist to a hydrologist. I assume you have to take some additional courses as well.
Sure. There are additional courses that you would take. There are some people who work in our office that are a hydrologist by degree, by education. I picked up mine through continuing education after I got into the Weather Service.
Okay. Can you explain to us some of the different types of flooding products that the National Weather Service issues? And also, can you tell me more about like the different types of flood advisories and all the warnings? I know that's a chock full of question and there's a lot of answers there, but can you explain some of that in more detail for us?
Right. So the Weather Service is responsible for issuance of flash flood warnings, which would activate your wireless emergency alert on your phone. We are responsible for issuing a flood watch. So more people are familiar with perhaps a tornado watch or severe thunderstorm watch, which is issued by a single center, the Storms Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma. But the local offices issue a flood watch, and that is a heads up that, hey, there is a potential for flooding. We also issue river flood warnings. Our office is co-located with the Ohio River Forecast Center, which is responsible for the modeling and forecasting of various river gauges along all the rivers in the Ohio River Basin. And so we'll issue the river forecasts. We also issue flood warnings for a given point. So the Great Miami River at Dayton, for example, will issue a forecast for them. And then if need be, a warning, although there's a good amount of protection there. We'll also issue flash flood warnings. Flood warnings usually occur during like the cooler season. I think rain over a longer period of time.
So what's the difference, once again, if you could, like you said, folks are mainly more familiar with severe thunderstorm watches and warnings. And so what is a flood watch versus a flood warning? Because we don't see them quite as often as like some areas of the country.
Right. So a flood watch, that is issued when conditions are favorable for flooding to occur. So it's kind of a heads up. It's not happening right now, but the potential is there. And let's say it covers the entire Miami Valley. Does that mean everybody in the Miami Valley will see flooding? No. But maybe the more vulnerable locations, if you're closer to a creek or stream or river, or maybe it might end up being that the heaviest rainfall might fall over northern Miami Valley up near Sydney or Pickle or Troy or something like that, or the southern Miami Valley. So that means conditions are favorable. A flood warning or a flash flood warning means that the flooding is either imminent or already occurring.
So where can folks, other than the television or listening to the radio, where else can they find out specific information regarding flooding for their specific area?
That's a great question. So our website, weather.gov, and our local office is ILN, India Lima November, weather.gov/ILN. Would have your watches and warnings on there. There's also various weather apps that are out there, whether it be from WDTN or the Weather Channel or wherever. We encourage people to have multiple means of receiving the warning. Certainly, the old school way to go is a no weather radio, which is still relevant. It still happens. You don't need to have great cell coverage in order to get those alerts. We really encourage the multiple means, whether it be through the Weather Service, a commercial app. It could be any other type of app that you have, but have more than one way of receiving warnings.
So just taking a look at this year, it's been pretty busy in the spring in the early part of the summer. It was like really heavy rain, and now we're all of a sudden starting to dry out. And then we saw this massive event that made national headlines, being Kerrville, Texas, of course, and that really kind of piqued people's interest in flash flooding and what can really happen. And people, I think, were kind of scared by seeing that video that came out of Texas. How can folks around here, are we at risk for something like that? How does topography play a role in this? What's the flood risk here in the Miami Valley?
Well, certainly. So we're quite different than Central Texas. A lot of people might already be aware that that area of Texas is called Flash Flood Alley, and it's called Flash Flood Alley for a reason. Two things. Number one being its propensity to get extreme rainfall events. Now, so for example, you might say, what is the rarity of, this amount of rain? So in the Miami Valley, for example, what we call a 1% rainfall, or people sometimes refer to it as a 100 year. What that means is in any given year, you have a 1 in 1%, just a 1% chance of that rainfall occurring. So in the Miami Valley, our 1% rainfall in 12 hours is about 4 inches. In the heart of Flash Flood Alley in Central Texas, that amount is nearly double. So they already have higher odds of having that extreme rainfall event. What really compounded the tragedy along the Guadalupe River is it happened during an extreme rainfall event. The odds were greater than 1 in 1,000 of that rainfall event happening. But what compounded it was it happened during 4th of July weekend. A lot of campers. It's a highly recreationalized area, and so you had a lot of campers there, right along the river, right in the heart of Flash Flood Alley. Could we have a very extreme rainfall event in the Miami Valley? Absolutely. It's a little less likely than what happened with the Kerrville, Texas, and it was much beyond Kerrville as well. But there was influence there also of tropical storm remnants, which we can have in the Miami Valley, but it's a lot more rare. So we can have extreme rainfall. We definitely can. And we do have areas, that people like to camp and like to be by waterways. So there is a potential for flooding, especially, again, I'll hit that old school no weather radio. If you don't have good cell coverage, have a method of receiving the warning and heed the warnings.
And the Weather Service, are they still continuing with their campaign of turn around, don't drown?
Absolutely. More than 50% of all flood deaths that happen in any given year are due to people driving through a flooded roadway. So whether they're driving around a barrier, and there can be fines levied if you have a road barrier, saying flooded area ahead. There's been reports of it can drive ODOT or your county sheriff's department crazy if people get out and move a barrier and drive through. So many people in any given year have to be rescued. So turn it around, don't drown is not just a cute little phrase. It's a reality.
And it only takes 6 inches of water to lift up a vehicle. And I think a lot of people forget that. They think they have these big trucks and they're like, I'm going to go through this. And lo and behold, unfortunately, sometimes they get stuck.
Right. Absolutely. There was an event that happened. It's been about 11 years ago now, but it was Huber Heights, Troy area. It was a May event. And a lot of times our peak kind of flash flood season does begin around May, but it can happen into June, July, and August. But a tremendous amount of rain in the Huber Heights area, in Troy. A lot of people were stuck, in it's all concreted with a concrete center barrier there on Route 35 and I-70. So it definitely is not out of the question to have an event like that happen right on top of a urbanized area.
Yeah, like how this video is showing folks just getting stuck. And then the last thing that you want to do is have somebody come out now and rescue you because you were thinking, I'm going to go through this.
Right. You're not only putting your own life at risk, you're putting the life of your passengers at risk and the emergency personnel who might try to come and save you. So there have been cases in Ohio where emergency responders like you see here go out to try to save somebody and their life is lost. So it's really ultimately, is it worth it? It's not worth it driving into a flooded area.
So let's talk a little bit about what's been going on this year. We saw, like I said, a really wet spring, beginning part of summer, and now all of a sudden it's gotten dry, which is not completely out of the ordinary for fall. But in general, I mean, we were getting all this rain and rain and rain, and now it's flipping over to dryness. Some folks have even considered it a flash drought, if you want to. Can you explain, like, topsy-turviness of all this?
Absolutely. So earlier in the spring, in in April, we had a lot of flooding in the area. We continued into the early part of the summer, just having a lot of rain. So high water levels in creeks and streams. I know some of the recreational lines of work, such as a canoe livery, they had a hard time, getting their customers out there just because the water levels were too high. And then you get into the second half of July, things started to taper off, or shift, I should say, because Central Ohio actually had a lot of flooding in late July, and then all of a sudden, not much. And it's been a lot of hit and miss. I know some areas of Central Warren County, for example, there was one storm event we had three inches in a single day, whereas up in southern Montgomery County, pretty much not anything. So it's been a lot of
That's my house. We're like in a hole where we get nothing,
Right.
when everybody else gets all the convective stuff and we get nothing.
Exactly. And I was one of the people who measured 3 inches in a single day. Yeah. So
We probably got 0 at my house.
it can be really hit or miss. That's the thing about summertime weather. A lot of times you have these very, very small thunderstorms that are extremely intense, but they only cover a very localized area. You could go 2-3 miles away and not have anything. So we have had areas of the Miami Valley that are starting to get into that abnormally dry quantification. There is an entity, it's the State Climate Office of Ohio, that kind of puts together what we call the drought monitor. What are conditions like? So we'll have, how are things looking? So yeah, there's the website, State Climate Office of Ohio. They have details on there about drought. There's climate tools, all kinds of things. So this office, the state climatologist, actually has expertise in agricultural meteorology and agricultural weather.
Okay.
So drought doesn't necessarily only affect the agricultural community. It certainly can. But yeah, we've had a lot of this extreme dryness recently. And probably the most vulnerable crop, which people don't think about, is actually hay. So a lot of farmers, they keep livestock and they want to get, a few cuttings of hay to feed their livestock over the summer. And if they can't get enough cuttings of hay, they might have to, go out and buy it. And it definitely can be troublesome. It goes beyond just traditional thinking of corn and soybeans. In the Miami Valley, we do have the Miami aquifer, so we're not in an area of the country where we have to worry about water shortages as much as other parts of the country or even the state.
Okay, we are going to take a quick pause here, and we are going to continue our conversation with Julie Dian-Reed from the National Weather Service, and we are going to continue to talk more about hydrology in the Miami Valley. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Under the Umbrella. I'm WDTN Plus meteorologist, and today we are talking with Julie Dian-Reed, who is with the National Weather Service and is a hydrologist. And we've been talking, Julie, about like the Kerrville, Texas, and all the various types of flooding events that have occurred recently. Let's go more specifically to the Great Miami River. You mentioned how there has been like 100-year floods or whatever, and one of the biggest ones that we've ever seen in this area has been the Great Flood of 1913. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and what our risk is of getting a flood like that happen again?
Sure, absolutely. So it's often called the Dayton, Ohio flood, but it was actually it remains the single largest weather disaster in Ohio state history, as well as Indiana state history.
Even over the Ohio River?
Over the Ohio River, I think it is the second highest crest or third highest crest on the Ohio River at Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
But a lot of it was more so within the Scioto River Basin, the Great Miami River Basin, even into the Great Lakes drainage, the water that flows into Lake Erie, and then into Indiana as well. What happened? It was basically 1913. The actual very heavy rain happened in late March. There were some accounts that were saying it was rain on frozen soils, which was actually not the case. It was actually quite warm before this heavy rain event occurred. And so what happened is January of 1913, there was a lot of heavy rain, some more typical flooding, and then continued kind of a wet winter. And then there were March 24th through 26th is the heaviest rainfall event. Could we have a rain event like that in the Miami Valley? Absolutely. We could definitely have that happen again in March. That late winter, early spring time of year is the most vulnerable because you don't have all the vegetation going. You don't really have a lot of water need, water draw. So all that rainfall goes right into the rivers. So
And the ground is hard too, right?
Absolutely.
So it's frozen, it's hard, it's not going to get absorbed, so it's just running off.
Right, absolutely. So what happened, there was a large amount of rain, primarily to the north of Dayton, but certainly Dayton had extreme heavy rain as well. So from Sydney on down, had very extreme rainfall rates, extreme rapid rate of rises. People were stranded on their rooftops. There's literally imagery of people crawling across telegraph wire. There was a kind of a collaborative effort that we had with the Midwest Regional Climate Center and a bunch of different state and federal partners to try to educate the people of Ohio that, there we go, the Great Flood of 1913. This was a kind of 100-year commemoration. So this website was created in 2013. So it's a little dated, but the information is still very pertinent. So you see some of the images there. People don't associate this type of damage and debris that can happen with widespread flooding. I've surveyed, the aftermath of massive floods, and it literally looks like a muddy tornado went through the area. It created tremendous health hazards. You see a lot of horses. This is 1913. People were still relying on horses for transportation. So the health concern came with once the water receded, a lot of dead horses in the area. But Dayton at that time was extremely vulnerable because we think about it, we have the Great Miami, the Stillwater River, and the Mad River kind of coming together all right there in a low area, which is Dayton, Ohio. So it was a very vulnerable location. There has been tremendous effort since then. People might know the stories of the creation of the Miami Conservancy District. Certainly, Carillon Park has a great display and great interactive display on the Great Flood of 1913. But there was tremendous innovation. I did a little research on Arthur Morgan, who was the principal engineer of the Miami Conservancy District, and forming the protection that covers the Miami Valley. And when people think of flood protection, they think of a levee system. Well, levees could be part of a flood protective system. You shouldn't rely 100% on levees, but what was tremendously beneficial about the Miami Conservancy District system is they also have the series of 5 dry dams. People think about the Metro Parks area. So it basically acts like a bathtub to hold a little water in there and hold onto more water. And then as additional rain falls, it continues to let a controlled amount of water out. So this interactive display, you can click on the individual communities. So you can click on Piqua, Dayton, Middletown, and kind of see what the impacts were of the 1913 flood. Dayton had the highest number of fatalities just because it was a high population center at that time. It's interesting, the actual rainfall that occurred back then, it was Weather Bureau data, not Weather Service. People were stranded in the building where they actually collected the rainfall, and they were stranded for several days, and some of the people drank the water in the rain gauge. So the true record of the rainfall at that specific location is unknown, but there were other locations as well. So yes, we can definitely have that amount of rainfall, but there are, in addition to flood protections, there's more flood regulations. There are, zoning requirements, not building in a floodway, and that sort of thing.
So how do you work with local communities to establish like new flood stages for the local waterways?
Right. So we operate various flood forecast points or daily river forecast services, and we always work with the county emergency management agency. Sometimes the floodplain administrator is involved as well. So we want to issue river flood warnings that mean something. So in other words, it's not just a little high water here. It has some impact. Maybe a road is flooded. So mitigation can occur, and that sometimes does happen through county emergency management, state or federal emergency management, where let's say homes that have had repetitive losses due to flooding, might be removed or elevated or something of that nature. So maybe your risk changes over time. So we'll look at that. I'm required to look at it on about a 5-year return period. Every 5 years, has there been mitigation that occurred? Maybe we need to raise these flood levels a little bit, that the area is not as vulnerable anymore. So I always work with the local officials because those critical flood stage levels are really owned by them. They know their communities best. I can make recommendations, but they might see something that I don't see.
Exactly. So, can you tell us more about the new technology that the National Weather Service is going to start rolling out, the flood inundation mapping, and can you tell us more about it and how people can use it?
Sure. So, just in the last couple of years, the National Weather Service has unveiled dynamic flood inundation mapping. Now, flood inundation mapping can be created by various agencies. It can be by the U.S. Geological Survey, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. There's certainly modeling and mapping that can be done at the community level as well. So, what the National Weather Service does is more dynamic flood inundation mapping. This particular example right here, this is a project that we're pretty proud of. That was a very collaborative effort, and you see that little logo there, the Silver Jackets. So, what Silver Jackets is, it's many federal agencies working together. You don't want to have these stovepipe areas of work. You want to work together as federal agencies, as state and local agencies. So what we did, it was the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that created this map for the Great Miami River in Franklin, Ohio. And as you scroll above the top there, you can see the different levels based on the gauges, and you can go higher and see how this is what the levels look like. So you go all the way up to 24 feet, for example.
Here we
And-
go. There you go. There's 24 feet. There you
Right.
go.
So,
So you can see.
absolutely. So this
Oh,
is what
this is
a
fun.
flood of 25 feet would look at in
Yeah.
Franklin, Ohio. And those little areas of black, there is flood protection. There are levees that protect both the east bank and the west bank of Franklin. So you see the areas of protection. So you see that it's not completely protected. It really is not feasible to put giant flood levee walls on either side of a river. But the way the levee system was created after the 1913 flood, in the early 1920s, the dry dams came into effect and the levee system came into effect. The levees were built and designed to protect the population center at that time. Now, certainly, population growth has happened away in different areas, so you may or may not be protected by this levee area. So I would definitely encourage people, if you live in an area that is affected or protected by Miami Conservancy, check out their website. Check about am I protected by a levee area? If you're not protected by a levee, those 5 dry dams are also an additional area of protection that they hold on to the water. It was designed to be a more comprehensive flood protection system, not just relying on levees.
So how do folks find out exactly if they're protected by the levee? What's the name of the website again?
So it's Miami Conservancy. I think it might be .org. So if you yeah. So if
But just
you,
do a search.
Right, Miami Conservancy District, and they'll highlight the dry dams. They'll highlight their levee protected areas. So you're able to see, is my home in a levee protected area? Where can I go to find information? Certainly, that doesn't mean you are at zero risk,
Right.
But it's a reduced level of risk.
So when should folks be paying attention to this type of mapping and trying to find out when they should use this?
Well, anytime, certainly pay attention to forecasts. It's if you're watching WDTN or your other source of
Yes.
information. If you see talk of we're looking at the potential for flooding coming up, check out the Miami Conservancy District website. Certainly go to weather.gov. Look for am I under a higher risk of flooding, and then try to see where do I sit in terms of my risk. In terms of your everyday risk, you can also check out, do I live in a floodplain? And certainly you can go to, there's a FEMA Map Service Center where you can, it's a very interactive map. So,
got that
yeah.
one. There we go.
There we go. So if you scroll up to the top here, there's a little bar up at the top there. You can just plug in your city. So you can go to Dayton, Ohio, in that little search bar. And it'll tell you, hey, what is my area of risk? You can even, search by address, and it'll show you where those people think about the 100-year flood. Again, we don't like to use that terminology. We like to use the 1%,
Right.
meaning it won't happen, and then, I got another 99 years before I have a flood like that. It's basically in any given year, you have a 1% chance of that flood risk happening. So, you'll see your map here, and certainly this, if you scroll up a little bit, so this area, the brownish amber color, that's actually what we call the 0.2%. So that's like a 500-year flood. So there certainly is still some risk. You can go to an interactive viewer there right above the map, go to the NFHL viewer. So that's the National Flood Hazard Layer viewer. So it's what we call GIS or geographic information system that shows different areas. You can search literally by your street address. Now, what I will say about the FEMA mapping and the flood maps, and if you get a mortgage, you have to determine, are you in a floodplain or not. The 1% flood and the 0.2% flood, those are the areas of highest risk. That doesn't mean that I'm not identified. That means you have no risk. Certainly anybody could be at risk for flooding, and not every little waterway is identified on the FEMA maps. It could be like a small creek behind your house. That certainly can flood, but that might not be identified. So what FEMA pretty much concentrates on are the larger waterways, larger creeks and rivers.
Well, thank you very much, Julie. This has been extremely interesting, and thank you for watching Under the Umbrella. We hope you enjoyed and learned something on this edition, and we look forward to a new topic next time. And you can email me at undertheumbrella@wdtn.com if you have a topic that you are interested in. Thanks a lot and have a great day.